Don't be feeling blue, no, no. Shine your light all around, like I know you can do, baby. Yeah, I know you can do. Now some people call me. Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, my very special guest is Geoff Dixon. Geoff is a researcher, teacher, and philosopher in the field of consciousness and metaphysics. Geoff discusses the importance of developing and enhancing our own inner work to overcome many of the obstacles within the matrix. And so, without further ado, here's the show with Geoff. Well, folks, welcome to another show. This one's going to be a very good show because my friend Geoff Dixon is with us. And Geoff has his own YouTube channel, and the YouTube channel is Geoff Dixon, and I'll have that in the description box below so you guys can and gals can click on the link and listen to Geoff's viewpoints and his philosophizing about what reality might be all about. And so I asked Geoff to come on because me personally, listening to Geoff's stuff and a lot of the work that I get into, I am very fascinated by consciousness. And what does consciousness mean? Does consciousness shape our reality? And so on. I think it's something that a lot of people in the truth community talk about, but they don't really, I think, dig in to really try to understand it. So it's more like a catchphrase more than anything else. And of course, outside of the truth and alternative research communities, I was just talking to Geoff offline, that I don't think many people really think about it at all. So, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So, to get things started, Geoff, I want to say welcome and thank you for accepting my invite to come on. And I was wondering if you can just take the audience through your path in life. Where did you start in life, and what was your trek like getting to where you are today and looking into the stuff and the material that you get into?
Well, it's been a very interesting journey, to say the least. I know a lot of people, get involved a little bit later in life after they have some, meaningful life experiences or something happens to them to put them on the path. But for whatever reason, I kind of came into life that way. I started having strange experiences as a child, as a young child that I can remember. I was brought up in a very, very religious household, and I lived above my grandparents who were extremely religious. Every corner of the house where there could be a religious statue, there was one stuck in there. They were a very Catholic family, so Catholic that we actually had Mass at our house. Priests and monks would come to our house and say Mass. So that's the kind of family that I was brought up into. And in that environment, I was having experiences that were probably far outside of what the Catholic Church wanted me to have. And it led me into the path really early. I was very lucky in the fact that that my father was a boxer in the military, as was my grandfather. But my father was also into the martial arts. He started me in martial arts when I was 5 years old. And when I started in the martial arts, I just happened to go to a school that also practiced meditation and also practiced yoga. If you ever saw the guys that were teaching me karate, you would never believe that they were ever doing yoga or meditation at all. They were kind of like these meatheady kind of karate guys. They started me doing meditation, and once I started on meditation, the experiences that I was having, these, I'll call them paranormal experiences for lack of a better word, but these paranormal experiences started becoming more frequent, and that continued me on the path. I just kept trying to understand what it was that I was seeing. And when I was younger, I didn't know that other people didn't see these things. It was just normal to me. And some tragic experiences happened in my life that also intensified those experiences. But leading up into my teenage years, I continued on that path. And then once I was a little more aware of what there was as far as meditation and yoga and those kind of things, I started seeking out teachers that could help me understand the experiences that I was having. Because they were, as I was getting older, I was understanding that all people weren't having these experiences, that, maybe some of them were, a little bit outside of the ordinary. So I really wanted to try to understand for myself these things that I was experiencing. So that led me to seek out teachers. And I've been fortunate to find teachers that were able to help me put some of this stuff in perspective. From then on, I've been continuously studying and then also teaching meditation and qigong and martial arts and yoga, even venturing into some of the Western esoteric traditions, some of the Western magic and alchemy, things like that. As I was going through my own my own experiences, it really, even though I was experiencing some of these these crazy things that were happening to me, it still was kind of in my own head. Where my path sort of kind of changed was, just like for everybody else, a trigger for me was 9/11. And once 9/11 happened, I mean, I remember it like it was yesterday. Very shortly after, I start seeing the official narrative fall away, and kind of these two paths, the path of my own meditation, my own philosophical venturings. I started to see that maybe there was a connection between the world around me, and maybe the world around me wasn't exactly how I believed it to be. And that's when I started researching the connection between consciousness and the world around us and society, and the fact that maybe everything that's presented to us may not be exactly as it is.
So, Geoff, when you talked about when you were a child and there were experiences maybe that the Catholic Church wouldn't approve of or recognize, what would some of those experiences be? Because I've had experiences as well, and I'm just wondering if what you experienced was similar to things that I experienced.
Well, for instance, I mean, I was experiencing, from a young age, not that I lived in a haunted house, but I was experiencing sounds, and hearing voices or seeing things out of the corner of my eye. I can remember when I was really little, I was convinced that there was a little elf that lived in the corner of my room that would say things to me. Again, these experiences, which led into me experiencing some energetic things, feelings in my own body, or feelings or experiences where I was seeing things or having visions of different things. Again, it was still within my own consciousness. There was an experience I had in my late teens. Again, re-emphasize that it might not just be me experiencing this, or it might not just be me having some kind of mental breakdown. I remember it was my late teens, and I was still living at my mother's house, and I was prone to falling asleep on the floor at night. I used to stay up late. I'm a writer, and I write a lot. I would stay up late and write and fall asleep on the floor. I remember waking up one night, and I was on my back, and I saw someone staring at me from about 2 feet away. And at first I thought it was my mother coming to wake me up, tell me to get my butt back to bed. But I quickly realized that it wasn't, that it was a face, it was a female face. And I mean, it's kind of comical to describe it, but if you could describe what an angel looked like minus the wings, that's what this being, or this person looked like. And she looked at me, she smiled, backed up, and then walked out through the wall. It shook me, but I didn't say anything to anybody, because I normally, like I said, I've seen and experienced a lot of different things. So, I didn't think too much of it, and I didn't tell anybody. About 3 days later, I was having lunch within that same room with a buddy of mine. We were sitting there having lunch. I forget what we were eating, but all of a sudden he turned pale white, and he dropped his fork, and his mouth hung open, and he couldn't even speak to me. And I said, "What's going on? What's wrong?" He said from where I was sitting that a person, or a woman, got up, turned around, and then walked out through the door. I said, "Describe her," and he described her as exactly what I saw. So, it started to click in my head that maybe, a lot of these things aren't just in my head, that maybe I am experiencing these things, and there's a little bit more to reality than what we're led to believe. And, instances like that just kept continuing, which again led me to question some of the things that were being taught to me by the Catholic Church in particular. Hopefully I won't get any smack for saying some of those things. I'll try to keep it, try to keep a little more reserved on my opinions on that. But, I started to search for answers for these things that I was experiencing. And now, there's confirmation from the outside that, some of these things are really happening to me. So, I wanted to figure this out.
Well, I was raised Roman Catholic also, and I had very similar experiences, Geoff. I refer to them as paranormal. At the time when I was a kid, I didn't know or have the wherewithal to actually speak about it. As a kid, you just kind of take these things in. And it's a very weird dynamic, because you experience it, and then you kind of note it, and then you go on with your life as a kid. And if you do try to speak to adults about it, they'll tell you that you're imagining things, or perhaps it was a nightmare or something to that effect. And I had those types of conversations with my own parents. So, as a kid, you quickly learn that trying to talk about it with your parents sometimes doesn't go that well, or it doesn't go down the path that you would like it to go, because you experience these things. So you don't want to be told that you're making it up. I didn't make it up because, I experienced it. And it's very interesting what you said about the lady without the wings, like an angel, because I had an experience like that probably, I would say, less than a year ago. I was in bed and this woman, I would say if I had to put an age to her, maybe she was in her 20s, but she was etheric. And she came to me and she held her hand out and she wanted me to take her hand. And I said, well, I'm not going to give you my hand until I know who you are. And then she kind of smiled. She had a very pleasant smile about her. And then she just kind of nodded a little bit and she pulled her hand back and then she backed up. And again, like you said, she just faded into the wall that was there. It's those types of experiences myself that made me realize that there was a whole lot more to this than what we were being told and taught. A whole lot more. And the thing is, you don't really feel like you have an audience or a venue to speak to about it, because many people haven't had these experiences. And so when you do try to talk about it, they think you're a little weird. So at least that was the experience or the feedback I felt like I was getting when I tried to raise these things. So where did you go with trying to understand what you were experiencing? Did you know it was some form of consciousness or did you think it was an altered state? How did you follow up on it so that you can get more clarity about what it could possibly be?
So as I was having these experiences, again, I'm a very avid reader. Unfortunately, I was a philosophy and English major in college, which is why I teach things like meditation and yoga and martial arts for a living. That's a running joke of mine that, philosophy major. So I started researching. And again, I was lucky that as a young kid, I was exposed to yoga. I was exposed to meditation. So I started looking into different traditions from around the world. When you hear the stories of different meditation practitioners or martial arts people or qigong or magicians or sorcerers, they're having similar experiences to what I was having. So it was almost like I was back engineering it. I was saying, okay, I've had these random experiences, things that they just happened out of the blue. They weren't, I wasn't wishing for them. I wasn't looking for them. They just happened to me. I wanted for them to happen again. I wanted to find the way back. So I started, researching, again, meditation techniques, different meditation traditions, different, qigong, tai chi, energy work, things in the Western traditions. Again, Aleister Crowley was one that came up. I've probably read everything that he's ever written. He talked a lot about strange, bizarre experiences. So, hey, I'm going to listen. I'm going to listen to anybody who has any idea or who has had experiences. I want to know. I want to know what they were doing, how they did it, and see if I can incorporate it into what I'm doing. So I started, again, looking for teachers who could teach me techniques so that I could try to replicate. I could replicate this. And what I learned is that there have been techniques. There's been, every culture around the world has had people that have had experiences like this, and they've developed techniques in order to take people down that path so they can have those experiences too. And I dove headfirst into it, and I've never come out of it. The thing that I really enjoy about it is that as I'm learning these techniques myself and able to replicate some of the experiences that I've had, I've also been fortunate to be able to teach other people the same thing. And, not like saying, I teach a meditation class to someone and they're going to have the most, crazy, experience of etheric beings like you and I had, but you're able to give people a glimpse that there's a little bit more beyond life than this mundane reality that we're sold is the only thing. Again, that leads into the whole, reason for me doing this and doing the YouTube channel is that, I see, the powers that be really doing their best to control perception and keep people from, experiencing these things. Because once you experience these things, Mike, like you've said, it's so powerful. And, it really shakes your worldview. And once it does that, that opens you up to all different possibilities. I think, the powers that be don't want us opened up to possibilities. They want the only possibility being the narrative that they're writing for us. as I put myself through the ringer learning these things, I try to work on ways to offer this to other folks so they can try to have some of the experiences that you and I have had.
It's interesting. Once you do have these experiences and you take a look beyond the curtain, you really do begin to understand, at least I do, Geoff, that what the controllers are trying to do, it's trying to keep existence at a very primitive level. And they don't want you to excel. They don't want you to ascend to a higher level of consciousness and awareness. They just don't want that. So they're doing everything they can to suppress it. And the fact that they have to spend 24 hours, 7 days a week in order to tap it down, to tap people's consciousness down, tells you how powerful consciousness is. They have to constantly work to make sure that you don't open up, that you don't become awake. So this, I think, is something that a lot of people don't understand, and I try to get people to understand, even in my own practice, to help them to understand how powerful the mind is, how powerful consciousness is, because once you understand that, you really can manifest some very, very good stuff in your life. But again, like I said, the controllers, they know this, of course, because they're engaged in their version of magic and manipulation of consciousness in order to tamp it down. I do want to ask you one question. You mentioned Aleister Crowley, and geez, I mean, depending upon who you speak to, you're going to get a different understanding and version of who and what Aleister Crowley was. So since you have read his material, and I have read some information on Crowley, I'm not to the extent that you have, what is your take about Aleister Crowley? Is he this evil person that most paint him as, or was there something else to Aleister Crowley that a lot of people don't get?
That's a huge question because, like you said, I mean, depending on who you ask, he was either a saint or he's the devil incarnate, or somewhere in between. I mean, a lot of people think that he was working for governments and utilizing his techniques to shape reality. Some people believe he had a huge hand in the 20th century and the world wars. Other people believe that he was, not a charlatan, but that he didn't have that kind of power. For me, I've read so much on him and, the different opinions. With him, just as with everybody else, I have to look at what he put out as far as, technique and what he tried to teach. That's what it comes down to for me, is that, what did he teach practically that I can use? And he taught a lot. He put a lot of effort in, and a lot of his more boring material was the stuff where he was telling you to sit and breathe and relax and do meditate. It was the mundane stuff and not the crazy stuff where talking about sacrificing humans and incarnating demons. So I've read his material, and again, there's so many different views on it. And I myself, I look at what did he teach? What did he teach practically? That's what I try to pull from it, because if I go down that path of trying to see what exactly he was or what he did or what, I get lost just like everything else. And when I think that once we get lost down those paths of trying to say, hey, what's right, what's wrong, what's this, I think a lot of times that's where the controllers want us. They want us not knowing what the heck is going on, not knowing what to believe. So again, I look at his stuff, and it's fun, it's entertaining to speculate whether he was involved with Nazi Germany or whether he was involved with spawning the the UFO sightings of the 20th century. It's really fun for me to do that, and I do that because I am a part of the truth community. I research all the time. It's something I've always done and that I enjoy doing, but I try not to get caught up in the arguing the different viewpoints, because that's where I feel that us in the truth community, where we kind of go astray when we're continuously arguing about different points, and then we wind up not doing anything about it. We wind up not working on ourselves or trying to again see for ourselves what's going on. It stifles our own creativity by doing that. So I know that's kind of a cop out on Aleister Crowley, but I think he did some phenomenal things as far as creating his own system of esoteric studies, and his metaphysics. Sometimes, I mean, all the people writing back in the day were so much more educated than the average person today. They're just reading his writings and reading his poetry is is mind opening. It's mind opening, and it gets my own creative juices flowing. But as far as me making a decision on whether he was right or wrong, I just look at what did he offer? What can I take from that to further my own journey?
Yeah, I'm in the same place you're at with him. I found him to be quite a character, and to express or illustrate the dichotomy is a lot of people don't know that he was a very accomplished mountain climber.
Yeah. Yep.
But he was also a heroin addict. Right? So there you have two opposite ends of the spectrum with regard to Aleister Crowley, and then there's everything in between. I do view him as being an accomplished magician. Based upon what the research I've done, the reading I've done on him, he was brilliant for what he was doing as far as his ideology, his belief system, his religion, if you will. But I understand where you're coming from, though. Was he good? Was he bad? Your take on it is, if I hear you correctly, is, I'm just extracting out what his process was, what it is that he was teaching, what it is that he was doing that was allowing him to be able to reach into places of existence that the average person was never, ever going to know about or see.
That's exactly what, when I look at his life. Again, I mean, you mentioned the fact, he was a heroin addict and a mountain climber. Hey, that's pretty tough. I've been an athlete my whole life, and I couldn't imagine being a heroin addict and a mountain climber. It takes a certain kind of guy to be able to pull something off like that. But he was an explorer of consciousness. Whether he was going into dark areas or light areas, he was an explorer. I view myself as an explorer of consciousness, and what he was doing was, he again, like you said, he's venturing off into areas the average person would never be able to understand. So I look at that as inspiration. Whether he took it in a dark place or he lived his life the way he wanted to. So that's something I could take from that. And he was pushing the envelope. He was pushing the envelope in whatever he did. When you push the envelope, and I'm not even just talking about when meditation or consciousness, but when you push the envelope in anything that you're involved in, it expands the boundaries out, and you become an example for other people, to show other people that they can go beyond themselves, no matter what it is. I gain inspiration from anybody who's pushing the boundaries, whether it's in the same field that I'm in or anywhere else. It's one human being, one human soul pushing their boundaries and expanding their boundaries. And, that's a beautiful thing. It gives us the inspiration to do it for ourselves and not be stuck. The situation we find ourselves in today is our boundaries are becoming more and more closed in as, the grip of the controllers widens through technology and through their ability to steer consciousness and steer perception. I think our boundaries are getting smaller and smaller. And you see this when you see, like, the fact that even though we have this communication, technology, people are becoming more and more isolated, more and more stuck in their own world. And, you don't even reach out to your neighbors like you used to. So anything that can push the boundaries, I respect it, whether, morally, that's a different thing. We all have our own morality, but if someone's pushing the boundaries, I respect it, and I try to learn from that and see how I can implement that in my own process.
What about Madame Blavatsky? Because she's another one where I see a lot of misunderstanding about what she was about in my readings and research about Blavatsky. It was a very similar type of thing where she was really on a path to expand consciousness. And that's my view. I mean, I know it's oversimplistic because we have an hour and a half to do the show. But what do you think of her work? I don't put it in the same category as Crowley, by the way, not at all. Very different in my view. But what do you think about her work?
She lands in a very strange place because if you take her on the surface, it appears to be that she was an explorer of consciousness, and she was able to gather what material was available to her in that particular time period and, try to put together a system and try to put together a unifying system, of consciousness expansion. And, she gets a lot of flack because, people, really, go after the authenticity of her work, especially when she gets into talking about hidden masters and all that kind of thing.
Right.
And it was, anytime I've ever researched that period of time, there was a lot of strange things going on, late 1800s, early 1900s. there was a lot of people involved in spirituality. And, from a scholar standpoint, people say, oh, they just made it up. They just did this. They didn't have the depth of understanding of, whether it be, Sanskrit or the Tibetan writings or wherever they were getting their information. They say that they didn't have the degree of scholarly knowledge, and they just kind of winged it. But it seems to be that there's something else was going on at that particular time. When you look at all the people that were coming out during that particular time, it seems to be there was some kind of spiritual current or some kind of like an awakening force, I guess, that was kind of erupting at that time. It was coming out, in different ways. And, Blavatsky, she had her ideas, and I think it was kind of coming through her. And if you just kind of view it as, that spiritual current of the time coming through her and coming through her knowledge, it's not as sinister as some people will make it out to be, that she was trying to deceive, or, again, the whole thing with the hidden masters. There are people and beings on this world, like as you and I know, there's things that are beyond, normal comprehension. And I can't say whether she was really in touch with these hidden masters living in Shambhala and, transmitting messages. Maybe she was getting information from somewhere else or a book. But I think that what she was putting out was important for the time and still important today, because she was trying to create a unifying idea or philosophy or metaphysic. And I think that's what's lacking in today's world, because everywhere you turn, people are trying to divide us on race, religion, creed, sex, keep us separated. And anything, in my opinion, that tries to unify people and create a metaphysic that everyone can kind of adhere to. I admire that. With her writings, maybe some of the writings aren't authentic as far as certain, sort of forms of Egyptology or, studying the Sanskrit text. Maybe they weren't accurate, but the intent, the meaning behind them, I think was something that was good.
It's interesting you should say the 1800s and going into the early 1900s. That was a very special period. There was a lot of spirituality. And also from a technology perspective, if we think back in time, this is the time of Nikola Tesla also.
Yes.
So, and I'm not tying, Tesla into Blavatsky or to Crowley. The point I'm making is that there was a lot of enlightening types of discussion, exploration that was going on at that time. Whether you agree with it or not is a completely different discussion. But when you take a look back and you see some of the personalities that were around and what was being exchanged and discussed, it's very interesting in my view.
Yeah, you're talking about the technology and talking about, Tesla. And I know you've spoken a lot to, Jack Hart about a lot of the technology that was developed during that time, especially in Germany. Especially in Germany, some very bizarre technology was being developed that, in a sense, possibly could be coming from that whole spiritual current. There was some things that were being developed that were, if not directly related to consciousness, could alter consciousness. And I think that all that stuff came out from this whatever current was bubbling up to the surface. There was an eruption, and you see in the 1800s and late 1800s, early 1900s, our entire way of life that we see now came out of those, the early 1900s, with all the technology being developed. And from my own studies, I don't know that the technology that they developed, it could be having a strong impact on our consciousness now. I think a lot of things were developed that we don't know about that can alter our view of reality. So I think a lot of that came out during that time.
I agree that they have altered reality, Geoff. Let me throw this out to you. I think about how things have changed during my lifetime. I'll be 60 years old in January, so I can go back 30 or 40 years, 50 years, and I can see a stark difference in reality. Now, some people might argue that, well, when you were younger, maybe you just didn't know about what you know today about the controllers and the technology has advanced and all that stuff. But that's not really what I'm referring to. What I'm referring to is there just seemed to be a different fabric that was involved with regard to your family, standards with regard to morality in society and the culture. Do you think it's possible that they have been able to shift the timeline? In other words, they've been able to nudge it over a little bit? Or do you think it's just purely based upon their ability to manipulate the mind with their technology and the media and all that stuff. Do you think they did it through technology, or do you think that somehow we got bumped over and we're in a different, maybe parallel type of existence or parallel timeline?
So this is something that I've been thinking about for a long time. And even though my research is limited, I only, I have access to, what I have access to. But it appears to be that a lot of the technology that was developed works in conjunction with consciousness itself. I think the powers that be know and have known for a long time that consciousness is primary. I've spoken a lot with Jack Hart about consciousness collapsing the wave function, as they say in quantum physics. But that's a fancy way of saying that our mind is what creates reality, that our consciousness itself is the creator of the field around us. I think that we together, all of us together, are working to create whatever reality is that is around us. And I think that a lot of the technology that was developed, especially back in the early 1900s, connected into this aspect of our reality, of our consciousness collapsing the wave function. And I think that they learned how to steer the physical world around us through that. Now, whether we're on a different timeline or not, it gets into my own particular view. I don't think that the world that we see around us is the only possible world. I believe that we as humans can access more than one reality state for different states of consciousness, through different techniques, through just focusing on different aspects of reality. Now, that's something that you see when, time itself, we're talking about time and timelines, but time itself passes differently depending on, if you're having fun, time flies. If you're having if you're in pain or, in a bad situation, time goes by slow, which shows that maybe time itself is not fixed. And I also don't believe that time, if you look at a lot of the ancient traditions, a lot of the ancient texts, some of the Taoist texts, some of the Vedic texts, the Eddas, they all talk about at some point about different worlds and different times happening simultaneously. That maybe time itself is not how we believe it to be, or how we're guided to believe it is, that it's a straight line, linear time. I think time is more cyclic, and I think that possibly things are happening, at one level simultaneously. And because of this, we're able to access these things. So I think that through technology, they might have been able to steer us and have us shift to a different timeline, or a different reality field where they could have a little bit more control. I really do believe that, like we had said in the beginning of the conversation, they spend a lot of time 24/7 trying to control our perception of reality. Because once they lose control of our perception, then, we gain the power back to control the reality around us and shift it the way we want to shift it. So, as far as shifting timelines, I think, I'm not saying, hey, they didn't turn on CERN and jump us on a different timeline. I have no idea. I honestly don't know. But I know that through the technology that they do have available to them, and their knowledge of us being able to collapse the wave function, that's another possibility. They could have just had us shift to a different timeline, a different reality field where they could control us a lot easier. We don't even believe or remember that we have access to this power, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. And an example that I use, and it's just a theory for those that are listening to the show, is that 9/11 was one of those events where they were able to steer the consciousness en masse.
Yes.
So they were able to capture the consciousness worldwide and direct it and point it in a certain direction. And by doing that, by steering the consciousness of the majority of the world down a certain path, they were able to manifest a reality that otherwise may not have ever existed. I look at 9/11/2001 as a key turning point in our existence or our reality here, because take a look at what has transpired since. So it's been 17 years. And it's been 17 years of just essentially rolling downhill as far as humanity goes, right? So to me, 9/11 was very illustrative with regard to their ability to steer the mind and the consciousness so that they can manifest their reality, manifest what it is that they want to see to walk us toward their goal line. What do you think about that?
It seems to be, again, because 9/11 was such a trigger for everybody. It seems to be that was their big oomph to really take control and steer consciousness in the direction that they wanted to go in. It was such a massive event. I believe they knew what they were doing, but I don't know if they knew it was going to work as well as it did, because once 9/11 happened and once they realized that people were going to believe whatever BS explanation with such a massive event like that, I think that was that was like the ace up their sleeve. They realized that once they did that, then they were on a roll, and that's why it's been happening ever since then. And if you notice, I mean, that was a major event, a major horrifying event. The events since then keep getting smaller and smaller, and their effort into them is getting less and less because they know that they can just steer it no matter what. That's why you see so many people like Matt McKinley. He's been able to go through all these events. I'll say the hoax events, and just pick them apart because they're getting sloppier and sloppier with how they're putting them together, because they don't need to be as tight as they were during 9/11, because it was such a massive impact to consciousness in general, and it was such it impacted the whole world. I think once they did that and got the ball rolling, the momentum was in their favor. They can very easily steer it and guide it now.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that they had an aha moment with 9/11 because they were able to gauge the degree in which they were able to steer consciousness and how effective it has been since 9/11. I think they have also become aware of, like you said, Geoff, they don't have to do big events like that anymore. We'll try to stay away from certain words so that we don't get flagged. Right? And, you mentioned Matt and Ole Damagard's work pointing it all out. A lot of it is very sloppy. There are a lot of open switches. It's clear when you take a look at the video and any other type of evidence that there should at least be a lot of questions asked. And aside from the minority of people that are in the truth community or the alternative research community, everybody else just buys the story hook, line, and sinker. And this is what they have become aware of. And I think it has become easier for them to steer consciousness because they realize that they don't have to put all of that effort into it anymore, that it was not as hard probably as they thought it was to be able to do that.
Yeah, it was like, a little kid trying to get one over on their parents, and being scared and nervous that it wasn't going to work, that they were going to get caught, and then as soon as it didn't, the kid gets confidence and just goes on a rampage. It was a pivotal moment because it showed them that they could steer the consciousness once they grabbed the attention of the majority of people. I think that's what they need in order to manifest the reality that they need to manifest. They need the majority, and the majority still are asleep. The majority still, believe, the nightly news narrative, and that's all they need. I think if it ever came to the point where, people in the truth community, the truth community grew to a certain point where, it went beyond that 50% or whatever percentage they need to retain control. I think, that then they're going to start getting scared. And maybe that's what we're seeing now is, in the truth community, one of the things that I've been astounded at is that, every few months, a new theory or a new angle of something pops up, whether it be, the flat earth, whether it be
QAnon.
Oh yeah, QAnon. What the new thing that popped up for me recently that's got me fascinated is the whole thing with the mud floods.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. But as soon as any new little topic comes out, you got people in the truth community fighting over it, fighting and arguing and going on both sides. And, part of me is thinking, are they allowing information to come out so that there is fighting, or are they fabricating some information so that there's fighting to keep, the people in the truth community from, reaching a mass consciousness where they can actually start to have that influence and get that power back. So, it's fascinating for me to, as soon as any new topic comes out, everyone wants to fight about it and, leave mean comments on YouTube about it. And, it creates this, this animosity where there should be a unity, because it's in the unity of our consciousness where we can take back control. And, it's going to take something big to get the momentum back on our side. And, I just keep seeing people fighting left and right, which is one of the reasons I started putting videos up on YouTube about, meditation and techniques and stuff, because it's, I'm so sick of people fighting and not doing anything about it, not doing anything creative about it. And it's just all about, again, like I said, leaving mean comments on YouTube instead of thinking critically about things. And, even if we have differences amongst us, still, create a unified front, a place where we can all agree on so that we can move forward together. And again, try to turn the tides back in our favor.
Yeah, the truth community is not united at all. And this is something that I have mentioned many times, Geoff. And the controllers, and I got into this in a discussion with Sophia Smallstorm in our last show. We talked about artificial intelligence and how the machines are most likely at a point now where they're able to generate scenarios and outputs to be able to move the pieces on the chessboard in ways that the human mind can't even comprehend. So in other words, what I'm saying is they're way, way ahead as far as what the next move is going to be. They can actually predict where the thinking or the emotional state of humanity is going to go. So, they then move the piece on the chessboard to that particular place on the board, and they've got themselves all prepared for whatever it is or however people are going to react. So as an example, not to pick on Q Anonymous, because there are going to be people listening to this who believe it, I have said that it is a psyop. That's an example where, in my view, they put that out there because they do see the truth community and the alternative research community growing. More and more people are waking up. But again, they're growing and waking up, but they're not all rowing the boat in the same direction. So in order to keep them from rowing the boat in the same direction, they will introduce psychological operations like Q Anonymous in order to commandeer the narrative and to keep people fighting and throwing rocks at each other, which is what you just mentioned, because I see that all the time. People don't piece it together. Even in the truth community, there are a lot of truthers that buy into the whole Q Anonymous deal, and they seem to forget that it's the same narrative and the same scenario, and that was given to us back in 2011, 2012, around that time frame, with Ben Fulford and David Wilcock. Remember the mass arrest that was supposed to take place?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's the same narrative that's being played over again, except there's a different set of characters that are delivering the same message. So that's interesting too, because in the truth community and the alternative research community, we're supposed to have people that are critically thinking, supposed to be able to piece this whole thing together, to connect the dots. And then we see that even within the community itself, there are people that have short memories, or that they're not connecting the dots. And the point, I'm not trying to pick on anybody here. What I'm saying is that the controllers, through their technology, if you want to refer to it as artificial intelligence, whatever it may be, they are able to move the pieces on the chessboard in order to keep us backpedaling all the time. Just when we think we're making progress, something else gets introduced into the equation, and then it becomes almost like a reset, always keeping everybody off balance, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
It appears to be that they've figured out that it doesn't take much to keep us working on a mechanical level. The average person is kind of walking around like a robot, slave to their biological processes and slave to, certain mindsets. They know this, and they're able to, again, through AI, through just even basic strategy could just guide people, because they're not thinking, they're not awake, they're not thinking, They're just moving from point A to point B with absolutely no thought in between. And this is where I believe that it's important to stop and just take a look around. Take a look around and use your own eyes and see what's going on. And, just take a second to step out of your mechanical day-to-day processes and what you're being told, and just look around. Once you do that, you start to realize that there's a lot of work you need to do on yourself. As we started in the beginning, we were talking, about getting outside of your own boundaries, pushing the boundaries. People don't believe that they can see anything or feel anything beyond what they're shown. That's where they want us to be, I believe. Even in the truth community itself, people so often feel helpless. They feel helpless and powerless. If you start thinking, hey, I'm up against, world governments and powers and AI and, God only knows what else, demons from other dimensions, it makes you feel powerless. It makes you feel like that there's nothing that you can do anyway. And that powerlessness is their strongest weapon against us. Once you feel powerless, they have you, because then you're going to get depressed. You're not going to try to expand your own consciousness. We have to start to understand that. Again, the technology that they're utilizing against us, I believe works on our own consciousness. It works on our own ability to control reality. Once we start to realize that, if I have that power myself, what else can I do? Can I step away from the narrative that they're giving me? Can I introduce my own narrative? Can I research other narratives? Some of the videos I'm going to be putting out soon talks about I'm going to be talking about the creative use of mythology, utilizing world mythologies or your own mythology to be creative with life. I'm a musician, as you are. The feeling you get when you plug that guitar in and hit a solo, something that you've never done before. You just start jamming, and that feeling comes through you, and your consciousness is coming out and creating something that was never there before. It's a powerful feeling. It's those moments of power that, if you allow them to build, that's what's going to, again, break us free from this prison that they've set up for us, and make us more unpredictable. Really, we're so predictable. Again, you could just let the AI run everything, and they're 15 steps ahead of everyone because everyone's so predictable. But if we can tap into that creativity, tap into the powers that are within us, and not feel so hopeless, just one little break in that prison that they've set for us. The light comes in, and then you just go from there and you run with it.
Yeah, that's exactly what they do, Geoff. They disempower. They try to disempower, and a lot of people embrace it. What can I do? There's nothing we could do. They're holding all the cards and all that stuff. And so you're right. There are a lot of people in the truth community, as an example, that it's, they settled in on doom and gloom. And this is something that I don't want to do. And I've actually turned down requests to do interviews, whether I am the host or as a guest, to talk about stuff where it's just dark and negative. Because I believe that we need to stop feeding that darkness and that negativity, and we have to start talking about the positive. We have to start talking about the light. We have to start talking about doing our inner work, and that's how we're going to get out of this. That's how we're going to do it. Now, I believe that you can do it on an individual level, clearly, but the ultimate goal is for all of the individuals to come together collectively so that we could pull the whole thing out of the mud. But the first thing you have to do is you have to work on yourself first. You have to do your inner work first, because you have to be healthy. You have to be in a healthy place in order for you to go out and to talk or teach and educate other people on solutions, as an example. And we can't keep talking about, all of the problems. I've gotten to the point where I've got it. I understand it's a problem. Let's start talking about solutions. So I think that's very important. And that's why I like your videos, because you talk about that. You talk about doing inner work. You talk about how doing that inner work is you're going to rise up above all of this. And that's very, very important. And I want to get to your work in a second, Geoff, but I have two questions for you. I just want to get your perspective on.
Okay.
The ages, the golden age, silver, bronze, iron. Do you subscribe to the ages? Do you believe that that Mother Earth goes through her cycles as well, and that everything that we're going through here is part and parcel of what this particular age is about, or do you think the ages are just a bunch of nonsense?
Well, it's kind of hard to not look around at the world around us and not think that we're in the Iron Age, the Kali Yuga, as they said in Sanskrit. If you look at if you do the studies on all the ancient texts, I've done a lot of work through my own my own Sanskrit teacher. I have a very good Sanskrit teacher. Reading the Vedas from India, reading the Avestas, and then reading the Eddas in the Norse tradition. Even look into the Taoist traditions that I've studied in Tibet, the Bon and Buddhist traditions. And then, I have some very good teachers now, the Mesoamerican traditions and a lot of Native American friends. And they all speak about the same thing. They all speak about the cycles. And it's shocking to see that, so many diverse cultures came up with basically the same thing. Of course, there's slight differences, differences through cultures, but they're all basically saying the same thing. And it's kind of hard to argue with them. It's kind of hard to argue that nature, life itself is not cyclic and that we're not in a kind of a bad time right now. Yeah, I've been subscribing to the fact that we're in the Kali Yuga for a while. Just one thing I like to point out in the Vedic traditions from India, they talk about the Kali Yuga being so, degenerated, a degraded time period. But they also say that because of that, because it's so bad here, the possibility for advancement on your own, as well as, through community like we were talking about, is exponentially greater. Because it's so bad here, we can go that much further ahead, which is something that a lot of people don't focus on. They don't focus on that teaching. That we do have a possibility, an opportunity here because it's so bad, and we see how bad it is. We have an opportunity to grow in leaps and bounds, whereas maybe in the golden age, everyone was happy and laying around, and fruit was falling from the tree into your mouth, and you didn't have to do anything about it. It wasn't as much opportunity for advancement. So I think that's something we have to think about. No matter how bad it is here, it gets people like you and I talking. It gets people who are doing YouTube channels and writing, and it gets us stimulated. I think there's a possibility for advancement and creativity in there that maybe we wouldn't have if it wasn't so bad, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense, Geoff. You and I are on the exact same page, and this is the types of conversations that I'm having with folks as well. The Kali Yuga is a time when you are disconnected from source. You're really disconnected, and you can see that. You can see that all around us. People are not operating in a way which is spiritual. It's many times, I'm not talking about everybody, by the way, but we can see it in abundance all around us where it is this decadent, depraved, immoral type of behavior and way of operating in life that is certainly not the way of existing. It's just basically, it's a mess, and we have to go through this mess in order to develop. It's just part of the cycles. Now, what I wanted to ask you, and then I want to get into your work, because, like I said, you're bringing solutions to the table, which I think is great. You'll hear a lot of truther channels talk about Earth being a soul trap, that not only do the controllers have control over your physical being, but they have control over your non-physical being, your spirit, your soul, and so on. Now, I don't subscribe to that at all, and that's because of the work that I do with my practice and spiritual regression, the types of sessions that I facilitate and that I've also participated in as a client have been absolutely eye-opening. What you're able to experience is really beyond words. So when I hear people talking about being trapped here, that is very disturbing to me. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that in itself is a trap. I would like to think that the people that are putting forth those theories about this being a soul trap, I would like to think in my heart that they're just misled and maybe a little bit jaded or scared. I'm hoping that that's the case and that it's not just a psyop, because it's a god awful psyop in my opinion. In one of my videos, I talked briefly about it. There was a woman, and I won't mention her name, but she was very prominent in the New Age community a while ago. I'm talking maybe about 10 years ago, and she actually came from my hometown. I was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. She came from my hometown, which I didn't know at the time. But she started talking, bringing forth this very spiritual teaching. Very quickly, it descended into the whole thing about spirit trap, or soul trap, that we're here, that we're caught here, and then there would be one level of negative beings that were controlling us, and then 6 months later in another workshop there was another level, and then another level, and it kept going. It kept going ad infinitum and ad nauseum, really, because it made you sick. What it did was, it just made you feel depressed, like you were never going to get out of it. And I quickly realized what was going on, and I abandoned listening to this particular woman. As far as I know, I think she's still at it, but adding levels and levels and levels to the whole soul trap idea. Obviously, she's making money off of it, or whatever else she's getting off of it. But yeah, I believe that it's so far from the truth. I believe that whether it's put out by these people who are depressed or feeling dejected, or if it's really the controllers who are stepping in and creating this to create that feeling of hopelessness. I think that's the key in a lot of their tactics, is to create this feeling of hopelessness, because when you're hopeless, you feel hopeless. Why should you move? Why should you get up? Why should you do anything? It's a depression. Mostly everyone around me that I see, during the course of a day has some degree of depression and hopelessness to them. The second you subscribe to that, you're not going to move, and that's all we can do is move. We're here, regardless of if that was even the case. If that was and I don't subscribe to it at all. But if that was the case, well, what are you going to do anyway? You got to do something. You got to move. To hell with them and their soul trap. If that's what it was. But I just believe that it's another control mechanism. To create that feeling of hopelessness. And the feeling that, not able to, it keeps you from accessing your true power, your true creativity, which is, what I believe that we are as human souls. We're creative beings, loving creative beings. And when you can tap into that, it's amazing. If it was a soul trap, I don't think I would be able to have the wonderful heart melting experience when when one of my daughters draws me something crazy or something, and they give it to me, like your heart melts. If it was a soul trap, I wouldn't be able to feel. I don't believe I would be able to feel something like that. So that's my thoughts on it.
No, that's great, Geoff. I'm in 100% agreement with you. It's not a soul trap, and like you said, you have this love, and when your child comes to you with a drawing, or you love your spouse, your wife, your partner, whatever. People don't understand that this is an experience that we're having. This is what this is all about. At least from my teachings and my practice and the things that I do, I look at it this way. We have incarnated into, it's theater. It's a play. You have a role. You're a character in a play. That's what it is. And it seems real. Yeah, yep, it's real. It's real because that's how it's supposed to be. But you're not trapped here. Like Martin Kenny once told me, he said, the Creator has not abandoned us. He didn't throw his hands up and say, okay, well, you know what? I can't do this anymore. Everything goes in cycles, and it's a process. And what we do here is part of that cycle and part of that process.
That's exactly, when people say, if you have a worldview where whatever created this worldview can abandon it or leave us here alone, it doesn't seem to be a comprehensive worldview to me. One of the most interesting early on, metaphysics that I studied, and it's probably, in my opinion, one of the most advanced metaphysics that I've studied in my whole life is the Kashmiri Shaivism. They go through great lengths to show that the basis of all reality is this conscious energy. In that tradition, they call it Shiva, but it just means the conscious energy, the creator, the creative source, and that through the play, the dance of this source creates different, what they consider covers, where it's kind of like, it'll create time and space, more so not to trap consciousness, but to give consciousness something to play with and something to advance itself, and just for the love of playing and creating. And I like to think of it that way. It's, if you think that the whole point of existence is just to be in hell and to be tortured, again, that creates that hopelessness. If you see everything as part of one conscious creation, like you were saying about, coming here to, play a role, you can see that maybe you're free to switch up the role a little bit, try something else, try to move in a different direction, try to see what you can accomplish. And when you're doing something like that, then you're actually progressing and you're moving forward, which is why I think we're here, and why I think possibly that times have become so trying, is that we need to start to think creatively. We need to start to get back our creativity and start to enjoy being creative and, being the little creators of reality that we are. And when you do that, when you create something, when you feel the freedom of that, that joins you, I believe, and in my opinion, it joins you to the bigger creation. And, which is why I think that we're here. I think we're here to relearn that we have that power to create and to utilize who we are or who we want to be as a tool to make this creation better, to try to bring it back and steer it back into course. So that's, again, that puts some responsibility on our shoulders, but it's a responsibility that has joy that goes along with it. Every little step we take, every little thing we conquer within ourselves, and every time we push the boundaries a little bit, you get that little bit more joy. And that's what they say in Kashmiri Shaivism. They say that as you remove these covers, that have popped up, blocking you from seeing the totality of creation. Every time you remove one little one, you get a little bit more joy, until you finally reconnect to source, reconnect to the source of it all. And it's a journey, and it should be it's not always easy. It's far from easy, but there should be joy in it. And I think that too often that we don't see the joy, we don't see the little victories.
The creativity aspects of it, Geoff, and imagination, that is so important, very important. And again, this is something that the controllers try to shut down. And you're absolutely right. When humans create, everything just lights up. You're a musician, I'm a musician, so we know what it's like, when you're in that zone and you're putting it all together, it's coming together and it's exhilarating. And that is, in my view, what people really should be striving for on a consistent basis. That exhilaration of being engaged in creativity, in using your imagination, versus just walking around, like you said before, like a robot in the doldrums, thinking your big thing for the day or for the week is going to be the football game on Sunday.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because I don't want to shortchange you on what you have been putting out on your YouTube channel, which I think is great stuff.
Thank you.
So let's just say, Geoff, people are asking right now, I'm sure they're asking, so what things should I be doing to get started on this different path? So are there some fundamental techniques that the listeners should start engaging in order for them to increase their awareness, to raise their consciousness? What would you suggest that they start with first?
Well, it seems to be that because we're so preoccupied and overstimulated, just by the way society is now, and then the plethora of technology, we're bombarded constantly. A simple thing would be to just disconnect from your phone, disconnect from your computer, disconnect from TV, and just sit for pick 5 minutes a day where you're just sitting. I'm not saying go into a deep meditation where you're one with the universe, but just sit. Go sit on your front porch. Go sit on a park bench. Go just sit somewhere. Start there. Just start looking at the world around you and start feeling what it means to be a human being in the body that you're in, and start from there. The next step would be to start to try to get healthy, because we're so bombarded with, again, through the technology, the overstimulation of the senses, and then plus our toxic food, toxic air. We have these these bodies, whether you want to consider them real solid bodies or not, but we have these bodies that aren't feeling too good, that are feeling beat up. Taking simple measures just to recorrect that and be healthy again. Again, that's like a very basic step, but do what you can to be healthy. I know it's difficult, but get some exercise, start eating a little bit better. Then from there, again, it's just again, the techniques that I normally teach students who come to me. The first thing I start teaching them is to learn how to breathe again, doing breathing exercises, slowing your breathing down, and utilizing the breath, which is in all traditions, in all religious traditions, in all spiritual traditions, the breath is important. The breath, a lot of times, most of the time, is equated with spirit. And just taking the time just to feel your breath going in and out it'll show you that you do have some control over the world around you. When you take some deep breaths, when you do deep breathing, for instance, deep diaphragmatic breathing, belly breathing, like I teach, they've proven that it's impossible to be in a state of anxiety while you're doing this deep belly breathing. It doesn't work. Normally, when you're in a state of anxiety, you're breathing shallow, you're breathing into the top part of your chest. All these god-awful chemical reactions are happening in your blood that make you even more stressed. So just taking the time to learn how to breathe correctly goes a long way towards slowing the world around you down a little bit. Shows you that you have a little bit control over your perception of time. Over the last couple of years, I've been teaching some of the more advanced meditation techniques that I teach, stripping them down and just giving them to people as just a remedy for the insanity that they're facing every day. People who don't really have a proclivity to sit down and meditate are feeling phenomenal doing it. Just the simple exercises of breathing and slowing everything down. Once you realize that you could slow your own anxiety down, you could slow your own perceptions down, that opens up a whole other world. You start to say, hey, what else can I control? What other parts of my life can I control? And it's a gateway to realizing that we do have control over not only our own physiological processes, but you have control over your mind states. And from there, again, it's the sky's the limit with that.
It's interesting. It took me a long time to get into yoga, Geoff. I was always, going to the gym, lifting and stuff like that. And finally, in my later years, I got into yoga. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because you talk about the breathing. And with yoga, breathing and becoming aware of your breathing is very, very important. I've seen huge benefits just by now. I'm not a yoga expert. I'm not a yogi. I do basic yoga, but just doing the basics I have found has been very, very beneficial.
And it's not a thing where, like, a lot of times people will come to me and maybe they read something about some great yogi or this or that, doing miraculous things. It's not about that. It really is about becoming more aware of what it means to be human, to be a human soul here. To realize that there's more to experience than mechanical everyday experience. There's so much more we could be doing, so much more we could be experiencing. And the breathing stuff, you could take that into anything else that you're doing. You don't need to sit down and be a yogi where you're meditating 24 hours a day. You could take that into whatever else you're doing. You're talking about lifting weights. My body is very beat up from all the sports that I've played and torn out joints and everything, but I still lift weights. And I incorporate that the breathing exercises into what I'm doing there because it helps heal my body and bring me in contact with more body knowledge so that I can do things like that. Same thing if I'm playing music or if I'm writing. The more present you can be with yourself, the more you can know yourself, the more you can again, like I was speaking earlier, the more you can see where your boundaries are. Okay, now how do I expand them out a little bit? How do I reach out with them? And that starts by just knowing who you are outside of what the world around you tells you that you are. What society says, whatever your role is. It's part of their construct. It's not really who you are when you're sitting at home, doing your breathing. Sit home, breathe, and just feel who you are. Feel where those boundaries are, so that you could start pushing them. And you could start to first heal and then expand from there.
Now, Geoff, when you teach, is all your teaching, is it one-on-one? In other words, you're in a physical location, or do you do any remote types of teaching through Skype and stuff like that?
Well, that's the beauty of technology. Today is that we can do that. That we can do things like that. Of course, I teach classes, and I teach at I teach at two colleges, and some other small places that I teach out of, and I teach workshops and seminars. But the beauty of technology is that we can do that. We can reach out and contact people around the world, which is how a lot of my teachers now are halfway around the world, and we can still connect. We'll connect through Skype, connect through video, send materials like that. So that's again, it's something where we have this technology. We have the technology to reach out and be connected, to connect to other beings around the world. But it seems like it's more isolating us instead of us really taking advantage of it and allowing that connection. Because I believe we can. You can connect. It's not the same. When you're if you were sitting and doing a breathing exercise or meditating or whatever with someone halfway around the world, but it's the next best thing. And I think that we should we should utilize that, which is what I do.
So do you have a website, Geoff, where people can contact you if they wish to take your courses, anything like that?
For now, unfortunately I'm using my Facebook site. Facebook, I got a love-hate relationship with Facebook. It's kind of a double-edged sword there. But if you find me on Facebook, I have a Facebook page set up for my business, and then I put some of my writings, some of my videos up on there, and then Jack Hart and Araj have been very very helpful and supportive of me, and put my work up on their various sites. My writing and my videos and stuff, and some of my teachings on there. So if you're familiar with them or on their websites, you can find my stuff on there. But people can get in contact with me through Facebook is the easiest.
Okay, well, I'll put the Facebook link in the description box for you, and also your YouTube channel. Now, before we head out, Geoff, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Anything else that you wanted to discuss with the audience?
Well, no, but I was actually going to start off the conversation by hollering at you for getting me in trouble, because I teach a class at nighttime. I teach a class. It's an exercise class where we do some breathing and stuff. And my clientele, they've been with me for about 10, 15 years, and the age range is, I would say, 45 to 65. And I let them pick the music, and the music that they pick a lot of the times is the Beatles. And I made a mistake. They know me. They know that I entertain crazy ideas. But I made a mistake of mentioning you and some work that you're involved in, and I got hollered at severely. So I just wanted to let you know that you got me in trouble there on that one. But no, it's like I've been saying that to anyone who listen, us people who are open-minded and who are researching these things, I really believe that we have to keep pushing forward and quit the bickering, quit the setting up into camps. This world is far greater. There's far greater things to be seen than what we're seeing. It's so far beyond and so greater than your own limited consciousness can understand. And only by expanding your consciousness are you going to be able to see those things. So when we get caught up, when we get focused and fixated on these little fights, this little infighting, it just keeps you from seeing the bigger picture. And I think we should all push forward together and be supportive of one another, no matter who. If you have someone has different viewpoints, that just gives me another vantage point to see the world. I'm seeing through someone else's eyes, and I think that's what we have to do. Is if someone sees something differently, hey, let's utilize that viewpoint too. Just to expand ourselves and to not get fixated and trapped, because that's where I believe they want us to be, is trapped. And we have the power to go far beyond that. I want everyone to know that we all have the power as creative beings to really do something wonderful and to not feel that hopelessness.
Yeah. So some of the folks in your class, they don't like the fact that Paul is dead?
Not at all. Not at all. Boy, I got hollered at. They'll go along with me on the ride. All the crazy things that I say and I talk about, they go along with it. Conspiracy theories and everything else. That one, for some reason, boy, it stung them good, and they let me they let me have it. I told them I was going to speak to you this weekend, and they're like, "Oh boy," they start yelling at me again. So I thought that was funny. It's funny.
Well, if they're listening, just let them know that even though I do the shows on the McCartney Conspiracy, I still love Beatle music and I still play it. So
That's exactly what I said to them. I said the music is still good no matter who's playing it.
exactly, whether it's Paul or Bill, the music is still great. Well, Geoff, this has been a great conversation, and you can come back anytime to talk about the topic of consciousness or anything else that you'd like to speak about, because to me it's just fascinating. And I think we have to do more of these types of shows and discuss this stuff. And people have just gotten so far away from philosophizing and just sitting and thinking and, wondering about what is existence, what is life about. So this type of conversation, I think, is long overdue, and I'm very glad that we connected.
Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate your support, and that I support your show, and what you're doing, I believe, is important, and the way that you approach it, and the sanity and the critical thinking approach that you bring to it, I think is important, and hopefully other people will follow suit. Once we get on that track together, we'll be unstoppable. So I think that's what we need to do.
Thank you for the kind words there, Geoff. And again, your work also. And again, your YouTube channel will be Geoff Dixon. That will be in the description box below. We'll have Geoff's Facebook page in the description box as well. And please, folks, check out Geoff's work because, in my view, it's very, very important. Well, Geoff, thank you again for coming on the show, and we'll talk soon. And that concludes another Sage or Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the description box below. And as always, I would like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can find all my social media and web links by visiting my hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to check out my music and album releases. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone with the next show. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
I was walking down this dusty road.